Thank you for joining us for today's session on Revenue Growth Management Transformation and how O9's platform helps deliver next-generation integrated business planning, or IBP. Over the next 10 minutes, we'll explore the challenges in traditional RGM processes, how O9 solves them, and the value this solution can bring to your organization. First, I'll give you an overview of how revenue growth management traditionally works and how O9's platform is transforming that process. Then we'll do a demo showing a typical day in the life of a commercial planning user. And finally, we'll wrap up with some key takeaways and next steps. So, let's start with the big picture. We're going to transport ourselves into the life of a commercial planning user and picture two particular user groups: key account managers, the sales folks, sales account managers, those in the field types having to negotiate with customers, and revenue management, the more analytical folks who provide that data-driven advice. Now, your key account managers are the ones on the front lines, interfacing with your customers every day, doing all those hard negotiations. You know all the sandbagging they have to do. Hey, I've been there. We know it happens, because they've got to deal with those tough conversations, fight for margins, and still close the deal. Meanwhile, the revenue managers are typically giving a lot of advice and analytical insight, telling the sales team, hey, here's how we can do things better for both our customers and ourselves. Now, traditionally, though, we see a lot of siloed decision-making. Sales might have one view in a spreadsheet, finance might have another, and supply chain might be off doing its own thing, trying to pre-anticipate sales. So obviously, that creates misalignment. People do a lot of offline data crunching, water cooler conversations, relying on chance encounters or ad hoc phone calls to get on the same page. It's not exactly ideal for consistent, robust decision-making. And this is where O9's integrated RGM and next-gen IBP approach comes in to unify these processes. By bringing it all together on a single platform, we make sure that your commercial teams, revenue managers, and demand planners are working with the same data, the same objectives, and ultimately the same plan. So let me highlight a few challenges right up front. Siloed decision-making, different teams using different spreadsheets or tools. Manual data analysis, spending hours crunching numbers and not enough time making decisions. And misaligned objectives. Sales might be chasing volume, while finance wants margin, and neither is working particularly closely with supply chain's capacity constraints. Now, in O9, all of these constraints and objectives get centralized. You basically have one version of the truth, which means all the collaboration and negotiations can happen in a more structured, repeatable way. We also incorporate AI-driven recommendations, so it's not just an offline guesswork scenario or a never-ending chain of approvals. Core RGM features we're going to focus on today will include our AI-powered pricing, promotion, and assortment optimizer. This thing is the engine that suggests which promotions, which discount depths, event timings, price changes, range changes we should be making, and more, predicting what kind of uplift you'll see in consumer sales for a given action. We'll also look at our unified commercial activity ledger. Instead of 1,000 versions of the truth, you have a single ledger, a single plan in O9 capturing all those different commercial initiatives, whether trade promotions, price changes, distribution adjustments, along with their financial and volume impacts, all in one place. Why is that so important? Because once you store those events in a single system, you can see exactly which changes are being proposed, how they affect margins, and whether or not you're meeting your gap closure targets. And that leads us to the next big benefit. If we think about the benefits of bringing advanced RGM into integrated business planning, IBP. Firstly, we have the automation of admin tasks. Instead of a salesperson spending half a day entering data, the system can populate it automatically, track changes, and ensure guardrails like pricing thresholds are enforced. Secondly, high-quality demand signals. Because all of these promotions or price changes or distribution changes feed into one system, we get a more accurate demand plan. And this means scenario analysis is more reliable, which is a huge benefit for S&OP processes. And finally, we get alignment across functions. Because when we say IBP, We're talking about tying commercial planning, financial targets, and supply chain capacity together, so that if you run that big promotion next month, you won't be blindsiding production or logistics. Ultimately, what this yields, better margins and profitability. You might not always go after the biggest volume if margin is what you need, or vice versa, but with a data-driven approach, you can actually choose the right trade-off. Customers who've rolled out O9 have seen everything from double-digit margin improvements to major jumps in forecast accuracy. And it's not just the results, they're also reporting more cross-functional collaboration and fewer last-minute surprises, because that single commercial initiative ledger tells everyone, hey, here's what's happening. So, now let's jump into the demo so I can show you what this looks like for a typical user, say, a revenue manager who's just realized that the current sales forecast is not quite hitting the annual plan. Imagine you open up O9's commercial planning interface and you see your plan visually represented. The pink dotted line is your phased annual operating plan, your target, and the green bars below are your current forecast. And oh no, we see the green bars way below that pink dotted line, meaning you're not on track to get that nice bonus or new sports car. So you've got to figure out, how do we close that gap? So the next step is, hey, let's check out the Trade Promotion Optimizer. This is where you can say, all right, system, here's my target. I need to grow margin or revenue or both. Within these constraints, maybe you can't discount below a certain net price, or you can't exceed a certain amount of promotions per quarter, but you feed these constraints into our AI engine, and it spits out some recommended changes. Increase the frequency of a certain event in June. Switch from simple price reductions to a buy one, get one free mechanic in July. Adjust net price so that you don't dip below that enterprise-wide pricing guardrail. All these recommended changes show up right there in the interface as a set of proposed events in green bars, while your original plan is still in blue. And O9 has basically coded them up so that the salesperson doesn't have to spend hours keying them in themselves. They can just look at the list of recommended events, see the projected P&L impact, because the system does a pre-event forecast grounded in historical consumer performance, and say, yep, that looks good. No, I know my customer and that one's not going to fly. Once the salesperson's happy with the plan, they'll click to submit those changes, and the system does a couple of things automatically. One, it updates the demand plan, so your supply chain team has visibility on the expected uplift from these new events. Two, it checks for pricing thresholds. If you're below a certain price, the system might say, hold on, you're going to need an approval for that. And if you're above the pricing threshold, it can be set to auto-approve from a financial guardrails perspective. By now, the user can see whether these changes actually bring their forecast closer to the original plan, or maybe even beat it in certain metrics like margin or NSV. And that's huge because traditionally, that process would involve a ton of offline spreadsheets, phone calls, or water cooler, hey buddy, can you help me out moments. So as we wrap up the demo, you'll notice how intuitive and automated the platform is. It handles the grunt work, like capturing events, calculating predicted lifts, and enforcing guardrails. And that frees up time for sales teams, the key account managers, to do what they do best: talk to the customer, negotiate effectively, and close deals. Meanwhile, the revenue manager can keep refining the data models, ensuring everyone's decisions stay grounded in analytics rather than guesswork. So now, let's cover the big picture takeaways. RGM and IBP. O9 seamlessly integrates revenue growth management with integrated business planning, meaning your commercial strategies are no longer off on an island, disconnected from the supply chain and financial targets. You get actionable insights. Instead of rummaging through spreadsheets, you get an AI-driven recommendation that's easy to act on, boosting margins and alignment. Finally, simplification and automation. The platform cuts out repetitive tasks, letting teams focus on strategic decisions rather than admin busywork. If that sounds like something that would help your organization, I encourage you to reach out for more info or to schedule a deeper dive into O9's RGM capabilities. We've only scratched the surface here, and we'd love to explore how these solutions can address your unique commercial planning challenges. Thanks so much for joining me and take care.